Many who see this video and accuse the Catholic Church of idolatry obviously know little to nothing about the Catholic faith. Unfortunately, ignorance is the loudest. So you can call it whatever you want to call it, but this is what is actually happening. This is Cardinal Parolin returning the skull of Saint Agatha to its bust, marking 900 years since the relic's return. What is a relic? A relic is a remnant connected to a saint, their bodily remains, something they owned, or something touched to their remains. And relics are not a Catholic invention. In 2 Kings chapter 13, a dead man is thrown into Elisha's tomb, it touches the prophet's bones, and the man comes back to life. In Acts chapter 19, handkerchiefs that touched Paul's skin were carried to the sick, and the sick were healed, and evil spirits left them. Even the shadow of Saint Peter performed miracles. So we see that God himself used physical objects connected to holy people to work power. So when we as Catholics venerate the relics of saints, we are not praying to them, we are not praying to the bone, we are honoring them. In this case, a woman who gave her life to Christ and trusting the same God who worked through Elijah's bones and Saint Paul's handkerchiefs, that he can still work through what remains of his saints. I must state once again, veneration is not worship. Worship belongs to God.
Do you know what this is? Do you know what they are doing? Because if I removed these European faces, if I replaced these robes with African traditional clothing, if I put this ceremony somewhere in Benin Republic, Ghana, Congo, or Nigeria, some of you would have made up your minds within 5 seconds. Fetish, idol worship, demonic. But this is Europe. This is Christianity. And that object you are looking at is a human skull. At least that's what they claim it is. The skull of Saint Agatha. Fellow Africans, I need you to look carefully at this video. Don't be angry. Don't laugh. Do not mock these people. All I need you to do is just watch. You see a cardinal of the Catholic Church in full ceremonial dress, carefully placing a human skull into a gold reliquary. Yes, you heard me, a human skull, claimed to be the skull of Saint Agatha, paraded through the streets of Catania in Sicily, Italy, kissed by clergy and government officials. Now, this is not ancient history. This didn't happen in the 1700s. This happened on August 17, 2026, 2 days ago. And according to the Catholic Church, this is not worship. It is called veneration. I need you to remember that word, veneration. So they are not worshiping the skull, they are venerating the skull. And while you are watching the video, let me ask you a completely different question. Now, do you know where the word fetish came from? I'm asking because this is one of those words Africans use so casually today. This is fetish. That is fetish. These people are fetish worshippers. That is a fetish priest. Fetish this, fetish that. Sometimes we don't even need to understand what we are looking at all. Once it looks African, fetish. Once it involves an ancestral object, once there is a shrine somewhere, once there is a carving, it is fetish. But have you ever stopped to ask, who gave you that word? Do you know how the word fetish came to be? And what did the people who gave you that word, what did they call their own sacred objects? Now, the word fetish is a small word that carries a universe of colonial weight. And understanding its origins is the key to understanding the hypocrisy you see. Now, according to an Open University examination of the European representation of African religions. The history of this language takes us back to early encounters between Portuguese traders and West Africans. Now, the Portuguese word feitiço was associated with made objects, charms or sorcery, and things understood to possess magical power. Now, European observers encountered African sacred objects and religious practices they did not understand through African categories. And gradually, the word feitiço traveled. It became fetish. And fetishism eventually became one of the European categories through which African religion itself was interpreted. Think about that carefully. Just let that sink in. Europeans encountered another civilization's spiritual system. And instead of that civilization necessarily defining its objects and practices in its own language, Europe developed terminology for explaining those practices from the outside, practices they didn't understand. And from 1760 onward, fetishism became an anthropological category, a European framework for classifying what they saw as a primitive stage of religion applied specifically to West African belief systems. And over generations, something extraordinary happened. Africans inherited that terminology. Today, an African can look at the religion of his own ancestors and confidently call it fetish without knowing what the object represented, without understanding the cosmology behind that object, without asking the practitioner what he actually believed. The judgment comes before the investigation. But here's the irony that Graham Harvey, a professor of religious studies, pointed out though. Now, he pointed out that those same Europeans, right, they were also wearing religious symbols and venerating images of their own deity and saints. You see? So neither group was ignorant of the madness of the objects they held sacred. The difference was in the power to define what was considered holy and what was demonized. Which brings me back to the video. Now watch carefully, watch closely. Do you know what this is? Do you know what they are doing? Because if I removed these European faces, if I replaced these robes with African traditional clothing, if I put this ceremony somewhere in Benin Republic, Ghana, Congo, or Nigeria, some of you would have made up your minds within 5 seconds. Fetish, idol worship, demonic. But this is Europe. This is Christianity. And that object you are looking at is a human skull. At least that's what they claim it is, the skull of Saint Agatha. When Catholics, like Cardinal Parolin, kiss a relic of Saint Agatha, it is called veneration. People honor them, they process with them, they bow, they kiss the reliquary. It is not fetishism, not idolatry, not paganism, not devil worship. It is not primitive superstition. They call it veneration. We are not worshipping them, we are venerating them. But when you do yours, they call it idol worshipping. They call yours worship, they don't call it veneration. Now listen carefully, because this is where some people will deliberately misunderstand my argument. I am not saying Catholics worship this skull as their God. That is not my argument. In fact, I'm going to do something European colonial observers frequently failed to do for Africans. Now let's do it this way. I'm going to allow Catholics to explain their own religion. Catholic theology says that relics are not worshipped as gods. Catholics distinguish between worship owned to God and veneration given to saints and sacred relics. Yeah? Fine. I accept your explanation. I'm not here to tell the Catholics what Catholics should believe. My question, however, is much more uncomfortable. Why wasn't the African people afforded the same courtesy. Why didn't you ask the African, what does this skull mean? What does this carving represent? Why wasn't our explanation sufficient? Why was your relationship with sacred remains called veneration, while ours became fetish? Why was your sacred object a relic, while ours was an idol? And why could your object represent something beyond itself? Why could those skulls represent something beyond those skulls? Why the African was supposedly stupid enough to believe that a piece of carved wood was literally his god? Why do you think we believe that if you did not believe that your skull is a god? And before somebody rushes into my comment section as usual to explain Catholic theology to me, save your energy. Spare me the sanctimony. Miss me with that. I already understand your explanation. And that is precisely the point. I understand that when you kneel before a crucifix, you are not necessarily worshipping wood, right? I understand that when you pray before a statue of Mary, you are not necessarily worshipping cement or marbles. I understand that when you kiss a reliquary containing human remains, you don't necessarily believe that human bone is God. I understand that. I understand symbolism. I understand representation. I understand intercession. I understand veneration. My question is this, though. Why does your ability to understand all these sophisticated distinctions suddenly disappear, like Kaiser Sose, when the religion becomes African? Why does it suddenly disappear? You don't understand anymore. You call African beliefs man-made gods, pointing at carved wooden figures. That's a man-made god. I will never worship man-made god. Meanwhile, you bow before crucifix, which are crosses made of wood. You bow before statues made of cement and sand. And suddenly, my question is no longer about skulls. It is about something much more powerful, something deeper. Who had the authority to name what everybody was doing? Why did you name yours veneration and my idol worshipping?
So guys, honestly, this is a Catholic trendy video of this call, this one. See, I know some people must talk. Why? Because of the fake pastors, the fake churches where they. That's why everybody only shocked. Say, Catholic church, who will see get trust on. You understand? Now normal ways they get reason to do that thing. But you get, if they don't video and show everybody now for say, we don't foresee. If they do it secretly now, they do it. They don't tell anybody for see. No. But some churches they those una churches they will be say that they do ritual, that they go river, go they bath people, they go 4 junction, they go 5 junction, they go 3 junction. All those things that they do for nights, we see they see una for inside the darkness. The one that say they do for inside the church. Most of the churches, I don't want to name any church. Most of the churches, many will say they do, they see all of them, but we don't they talk. But now, as we can come to church, everybody come outside. For the can, now juju. I don't just understand. They don't know juju. If you see juju, you don't know juju. They bring come, put on now. They talk something. See, they say that they don't trust, don't they believe church, huh? I say church, I don't know the church will say, I trust, say, they are legit.
I don't like to put my mouth for anything wey concern church. I don't like to put my mouth for anything wey concern church. See, Catholic church, wetin be this? This thing no be goat skull. They no be pig skull. This thing na human being skull. I beg, Catholic church, more na explain to us wetin be this. More na they do the one wey we go to understand. More na they do the one wey be say we go to understand. Wetin human skull they do for church? Wetin human skull, human being skull they do for church? Mona tell us, Mona first they explain, they give us first. Make we understand this kind of things Mona they do. I beg. Make nobody go spoil Christianity for anything. Make nobody go they spoil Christianity. I beg.
Wait. Before you call this idol worship, you need to understand what you are actually looking at. Because this video has been circulating online and people are asking, why is a Catholic cardinal carrying a human skull? Why kissing it? And why are they putting it inside a statue? Some people are saying this is no different from traditional religion. Others are saying this is a straight up idol worship. But is that actually what Catholics believe they are doing? Let's find out. The skull you are seeing is believed by Catholics to be the relic of a woman called Saint Agatha, and her story is actually quite remarkable. Agatha was a Christian woman who lived in Sicily during the 3rd century when Christians were being persecuted by the Roman Empire. According to ancient traditions surrounding her martyrdom, she refused to abandon her faith in Jesus Christ. She was imprisoned, she was tortured, and eventually she died for her faith. She became known as a Christian martyr. So when Catholics look at this skull, they don't see a God, they don't believe the skull is Jesus, they don't believe the bone created the universe. They believe it is the physical remains of a woman who died for Christ. And this is where we need to understand one important Catholic word: veneration. Catholics distinguish between worship and veneration. Worship belongs to God alone, and veneration is honor that they give to saints because of their relationship with God. So when someone kisses the relic, the Catholic explanation is, I'm not worshiping the bone, I am only honoring the saints. But now, here is where it gets interesting, because Catholics don't believe this practice came completely out of nowhere. No, points to the Bible. Acts chapter 19 says that God performed extraordinary miracles through Paul, and even handkerchiefs and aprons that had touched Paul's body were taken to sick people, and people were healed. Then also in 2 Kings chapter 13, a dead man's body touched the bones of the prophet Elisha, and the man came back to life. So a Catholic could say, what's wrong with honoring the physical remains of someone God used? And honestly, that's a question that is worth taking seriously. But here is my question. Does the Bible actually tell Christians to venerate the remains of dead believers? The Bible records what happened with Elisha's bones. But does it command the church to collect the bones of saints? Does Jesus tell his disciples to kiss them? Does Paul establish a system of relics? Does the New Testament tell Christians to build reliquaries and publicly venerate human remains? And this is where I need to tell you where I stand. I'm a Pentecostal Christian. I understand the Catholic explanation. I understand why they call this veneration rather than worship, but I don't believe the New Testament gives us sufficient grounds. And here is why the New Testament continually directs our attention to Jesus. Hebrews 12 verse 2 says, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Jesus, not a relic, not a statue, not the bones of a saint. Jesus. And there is something else in the scripture that I find very important. In Acts chapter 10, Cornelius fell down before Peter, and Peter immediately stopped him. He said, stand up, I myself also am a man. Peter was saying, don't treat me as though I am God. I'm only a man. And then in Revelation chapter 22, John fell before an angel, and the angel said, see thou do it not, worship God. Do you see the principle? So God's servants can be honored, but worship belongs only to God. Now let's address another misunderstanding. People have looked at that sculpture and said they've put the skull inside a female idol, but that's not quite what you are saying. It's called a reliquary. A reliquary is a container or artistic structure designed to preserve and display a relic. So from the Catholic perspective, this is not a god inside a statue. No, it means we are preserving and honoring the remains of a Christian martyr. You may still disagree with that, because I also do, but we should disagree with what Catholics actually believe, not what we assume they believe. And that's why I don't think we should simply say Catholics worship skulls. No, not at all. That's not an accurate description of official Catholic teaching. Neither should we say because Catholics call it veneration, nobody is allowed to question it. As Christians, we have to test everything by Scripture, because there is a very important question here. When does honor become devotion? And when does devotion become worship? That's the question. And this is why I believe Christians need to have this conversation. Not with hatred, not with insult, not with ignorance, but with Scripture. Because there is a difference between understanding someone's theology and agreeing with it. So the next time you see this video, don't just look at the skull ask, who was Saint Agatha? Why do Catholics honor her? What do they believe this relic represents? And most importantly, does Scripture support what they are doing? Because ultimately, Christianity is not about a skull, it's not about a statue, it's not about a relic, it's not even about a famous saint. It's about Jesus Christ, a woman whose remains Catholics are venerating died, the apostle died, the saints died, but Jesus is risen. And that is where I believe our eyes should ultimately be fixed. Not on the relic, not on the statue, not on the dead, but on the risen Jesus Christ. Stay blessed. Don't need to share this with someone.